Hello, it's Ty Anderson for Add-in Express. In this video, I want to provide a brief overview of the two main options you have for deploying your solutions that you build using Add-in Express. With Add-in Express, there are two primary ways to deploy your solutions. You have ClickOnce and you have an MSI-based web deployment known as ClickTwice within Add-in Express. With ClickOnce, you have the traditional application manifest used to deploy your application. You can put it on a network share, a file share, what have you. And with an MSI file, what it is MSI file, but it's distributed with a setup.exe file, and also can be distributed via a URL, file share, what have you. Now, the following of this is just a short overview that I have of different features. There's more of this on the blogs on the Add-in Express site, but this is a quick short overview because I want to then get into how you build both a ClickOnce deployment and a ClickTwice deployment. So let's move through this table of features pretty quickly. If you need more information after this, I would look on the blogs and on the Add-in Express website as well as the Add-in Express manual. So first up is automatic updates. ClickOnce and MSI or ClickTwice deployments both support automatic updates after installation. Post-installation rollback is only supported by ClickOnce, and this is done via the Windows control panel and the Add Remove Programs application. Updating from the web, both ClickOnce and MSI support that, so you can publish your updated add-in out to your location on the web and then have them pulled down from your users inside of Windows. The security permissions required to install the application for ClickOnce, it's internet or internet zone. That's what needs to be the minimum level of permissions, which means you don't have to have the administrator, you don't have to have admin permissions to install it. A standard user can do it. One caveat is if the ClickOnce application is being deployed via a CD-ROM, they're going to need a CD-ROM type installation where it could be a thumb drive. Doesn't necessarily have to be a CD-ROM, but that scenario they will have to have admin permissions. With ClickTwice, a standard user and administrator both supported. The installation process for ClickOnce is a single prompt. They initiate the installation via the link. A little window opens up, tells it it's going to install. It starts installing, and when done, it tells them it was a success or a failure. Either way, there's only one click, one prompt to the user. With a ClickTwice, it's really a multi-part wizard that doesn't necessarily have to walk them through different configuration settings to ask them to specify. The main one being the installation path. Installation for multiple users. ClickOnce, not supported. ClickTwice, yes, supported. The installation location. ClickOnce supports or installs it to the ClickOnce application cache. The user has no choice. That's where it's going to go. For ClickTwice, it's specified by the user. In terms of flexibility, ClickOnce has less flexibility. The ClickOnce has more. Good examples are the installation to the global assembly cache. We can install additional drivers. We can install shared files. You can add your application to the startup group inside of Windows, and you can register file types. There's more, and again, I would look on inside of the Add-in Express manual or the blogs on the Add-in Express website. Now that's a high-level overview of some of the differences between the two main scenarios. What I'd like to do now is I'm going to switch over to my desktop and walk you through just a sample add-in that I created using Add-in Express. Already developed. It's very simple, but what we'll do is I'll show you how to create both a ClickOnce deployment package and a MSI or ClickTwice deployment package. For the first demo, I want to show you how to create a deployment package for a ClickOnce deployment. I have here Visual Studio 2010 opened with a very simple Excel add-in created using Add-in Express 2010, and all this add-in does is it contains a ribbon button. I'll go over here to the designer that has a nice caption for Click Me, and if you click on it, we'll look over here at the on click event. It's going to display the host version and the host bitness of the application that's running the add-in, in this case Excel, and it's an x86-bit version. None of this really matters because all we're going to do is create the solution package. So what we do is we go to Project. First off, let's just start out. We want to start out with a solution that has been compiled. And then we'll go to Project and do Publish ADX Project. What we see is the Publish dialog box provided by Add-in Express via Visual Studio Extension. But we start out and we have two buttons, ClickOnce and MSI. So we can click between the two primary solution deployment methods. In this case, we'll stick with ClickOnce, and then we'll see who the publisher is, the application manifest name, the deployment manifest name, the processor, the culture, and we can choose the version if I had more than one version of this application. This information being pulled from the assembly info class. What we want to do now that we have built or compiled the solution, I can now populate, and we see that the publish directory has just been updated. Let's review the files. And what we'll see is we have the ADX launcher, which is our entry point for the installation. Then we have the Add-in Express DLLs, the ADX loader DLLs, and manifest. We have both the x86 loader and the 64-bit loader by default. The configuration XML file, and then we have also the extensibility DLL, but then the interrupt assemblies and DLLs for Excel, Office, as well as the VB IDE. Next, then we have the solution deployment files, the DLL and the related PDB and TLB files for the solution deployment add-in that I have. And as you can see up here in the top right-hand corner, the name of my add-in is Solution Deployment. Next, we have the provider URL, and this is the location where users will go to install it. So this location isn't where we'll publish it, or at least when we hit the publish button right down here. This is the location where we expect to ultimately deploy the application. In this case, I have by default my local host, the ClickOnce directory, and then solution deployment application. So this has to be exactly right, or it'll cause problems. If you put it in a location that doesn't match your provider URL, your installation will fail. Next, we can specify a certificate file, and by default I have my Tyrant ADX certificate. I could browse and find others if I had others installed, or I could just create a new one and do a self-signed certificate, and if I had a password I could also enter that here so that I can sign my assemblies. And now that I've set these up, I have two other buttons, Preferences and Prerequisites, that I kind of want to make my way left to right before I hit the Publish button. And let's look at the Preferences first. This will bring up the Preferences dialog box, where we have the screen split up really in a couple locations, or a couple main areas, the installing and the appearance. We also have the support location field, which is the location for installation support. Now, first off, in the installing area, I can say show install areas. I can choose to enable that or not. I can show the UI after installing, and this is the Add-in Express ClickOnce user interface that it's referring to. And then I also can show the registration message. The first and third options are enabled by default. And then in terms of the appearance of the ClickOnce window or installation screen, I can show the default UI, or I can show a custom UI. And if I show a custom UI, I will have to do that programmatically as the developer. It's not something that's handled by default. So I'm going to leave everything as the default values and say OK. Now let's tackle the prerequisites, which this allows us, or the prerequisites dialog box allows us to specify what components we want to also include. And these components are what ADX will do is create setup projects for them and install them before installing the add-in. Once they're installed, it will then use the ClickOnce API to call our manifest and install our add-in once everything has been installed correctly. So I could choose, like for instance, this add-in is targeting the .NET Framework 4, so I could choose to include this as a prerequisite for the installation. I am not going to do that. In this case, I'm going to just rely on a smart user who knows that if they don't have what they need, they'll go install it. Or maybe I would do something else in my installation notes, tell them, hey, here's where it is, and go install it there. Now, if I had .NET Framework 4 enabled, as a prerequisite to install. Then I could specify the install location for the prerequisites, and I can choose to either one, download the prerequisites from the components vendor site, or I can download from the same location as my application, which that's the default. In this case, I don't have any that I want to include, so I'm not going to say okay. I'm just going to cancel out. And now with all of our settings configured the way I want them, I'm ready to go ahead and hit the publish button, which I'll do right now. And we see down here in the bottom, well, first off, the solution deployment project has been published successfully, but look down here in the lower left-hand column of the publish dialog box, we see publish directory, which is going to be the root folder of my solution deployment solution folder, and then it'll be the publish and then the 1.0.0.0, which corresponds to my version number of my add-in. That's where these files will be published. I will close this dialog box, and now what I want to do is head over to the location where I have my add-in project, which is this solution deployment project. And now in the publish folder we have my all the files that make up the ClickOnce deployment. And to deploy the application, what I want to do is I'll go ahead and select everything with my mouse, and then I'm going to right click and say copy. And let's then move over to the location of my IIS installation. I'll go to the root, and if you remember in my application or in the publish dialog box, I specified a folder called ClickOnce, and that's where I will put everything. Now at this point in time, everything matches up with what I specified in my dialog box here of localhost ClickOnce solution deployment application. So I should be able to open up my Internet Explorer, click once, and all I'd have to do is let my users know where this is. And then they would go to this location using their browser, and they could click the solution deployment.application, which is the deployment manifest, and it would handle installing the application onto the user's machines. That's ClickOnce deployment. So now I'm going to close this browser, and we will close the publish dialog box. And now let's tackle the task of creating a ClickTwice or a web-based MSI deployment package. To build a web-based MSI installation package or a ClickTwice installation package, the very first thing we need is to make a MSI package, installation package. Now we can do this within Visual Studio by selecting project and then create setup project. This opens up the new setup project wizard, which is an add-in express wizard, allowing us to configure the setup package that will be created here. So I'm going to take all the defaults here, like the title, the description, product name, company, all that. All these values were set up in my assembly info.cs class. So I'll click next. Localization, I'll take default. File name, same thing. It's using the version number of my assembly here and taking my project name here and adding setup to it or pending it. Then the output directory is my solution deployment directory here, and I'll keep moving over. I'll select with my mouse and move over, and then underneath the solution directory, it adds the solution deployment setup and then a child directory with the version number, basically based off the version number of my assembly. So I will click finish to create the project. And what I have when Visual Studio is done creating the project, I have two projects, my assembly and the setup. But my setup, I'm going to have to compile everything to actually build the setup project. The way to do that is to go over to the build menu within Visual Studio and just say build solution. That way it builds both the assembly and the setup project one after the other. Alright, so now we can see that we have an MSI file, and what I'll do is I'm right clicking on the deployment setup project, and I'm going to open the folder in Windows Explorer. And I'm compiling with debugs, so I will just kind of move into there. And what we have the MSI, and we also have a setup project. Now, at this point in time, what I have is this is fully deployable. I could send this off to users, and they could run that setup program, and it would run. It's basically a Windows installation. But we're going to move on now to the ClickTwice, or the web-based MSI solution, which is really one of the two primary deployment methods for Add-in Express. So I will close the Windows Explorer. Now, back in Visual Studio, what I need to do is say go to Project menu, and also I need to make sure that I have the right project selected. So I want to select my add-in project. Now go to the Project menu and say Publish ADX Project. Now again, I'm back to the Publish dialog box, and ClickOnce is currently the enabled option. I want to now move to MSI. This dialog is pretty similar clearly to the ClickOnce one, where we'll have product name, product code, product author, language, version, all that. All this information will depend on what we pull up here in the installer file. And what the installer file is, it's looking for the location of the MSI file we just created. So let's go find that guy, which I am in my solution deployment folder. So solution deployment setup, version 1. I want to go to debug, and there is my setup file. So I'll select it and say open. Now, once I've done that, notice that the product name, product code, the product author, the language, version number, all that is automatically filled in. It's reading that from the MSI, basically database file. Next, for the installation URL, I can do the very same thing as I had done before. I'll just enter in HTTP localhost, and I will say ClickTwice. And again, this is the installation that users will go to access the installation package and install the add-in. This isn't necessarily the publish location, which is the one before that I neglected to talk about. I just skipped right to installation URL. I got so excited. But what we're doing here is we're going to the project's root directory, and we're going to create a new folder called MSI Publish and install the MSI package there. If I want, I could do an icon file. I've got my handy dandy Visual Studio 2008 image library here, and so I could move over to I don't know, I never know. Here we go. Windows Vista, and I could select an icon, kind of like the star. And so then I've specified an icon. Same thing here with certificate. I could move over to my Tyrant ADX certificate, and I can sign it. And again, too, I could create a new certificate that's for self-signing purposes as well. And if I had a password, I could specify it there. So basically, between ClickOnce and MSI, you move through the fields exactly the same way, except with MSI, you need to go find your MSI file, and then a lot of the information up top is going to be populated for you. Here too, we have the preferences and the prerequisites buttons, just like with ClickOnce. And if I click preferences, the dialog box you'll see is not as extensive. We have quiet mode during install and quiet mode during uninstall. And what this will do is specify, if enabled, it will hide the Windows installer user interface either during install or uninstall. And the download page for updates, that's your place to specify a URL for any additional information like available related to the updates. Say OK. Now the prerequisites. This dialog box works exactly like it does on the ClickOnce tab of the Publish dialog box. So the prerequisites dialog box, I can create setup program to install the prerequisites components or not. If enabled, then I can pick among the available options here, and then I can choose the installation location for the prerequisites, whether it's the vendor site or the same as my application. I'm going to unenable, deactivate, and say OK. Now all I need to do within the Publish dialog box is I can move over to the middle right-hand section of the form, and I can click Publish. and we'll see in the lower left hand corner the status of everything. So publishing has succeeded. We say OK, and I can now, at this point too, I could also install and uninstall the application locally using those buttons. There's not a need here. I'm going to go ahead and close. And now what I want to do is we'll copy the deployment package over to the website just like we did with the ClickOnce. I'll open a folder by right-clicking just the loader folder, and I'll say Open Folder in Explorer, which takes me to the approximate location within Windows Explorer. Now what I want to do is I'll select the Solution Deployment folder, and underneath that is the MSI Publish folder just created. And I want to move to this 1033 folder, and then we have 1.0.0, and there is the solution deployment.exe file and the MSI file. And what I can do is I can I'll move back up and I'll take the 1033 as well as the version info.xml file. I'll select these, copy them via edit copy, and now I'll move back over to the root folder of my IIS web server, and I need to create a new folder called ClickTwice in this case. And now I can paste those files, and there we go. Now we can move over to Internet Explorer and do localhost ClickTwice, and we should see our files there ready. So there's the version info in the 1033 folder, and I can, as the user, I'd be able to go to this location, the solution deployment.exe file, click it, and the Windows installer installation would begin, thus this being a MSI web-based solution deployment. And that's the end of this demo. I gave you a brief overview of both ClickOnce and ClickTwice deployment, which are the two primary methods of add-ins deployment supported by Add-in Express. And then I also showed you how to create a ClickOnce solution deployment package as well as a ClickTwice solution deployment package. And then I also pointed out at which point in time you had just a traditional Windows setup.exe package that you could distribute. I think you'll find that it's very easy to create the packages and distribute them to your users, and then also support them as you make updates to your add-in solutions. So good luck out there, and I'll see you in the next video.